Welcome back to the Quantum Couch. I am your host, Dr. Ina Conboy. Today, we're diving into Vedanta, one of the oldest and most profound philosophical traditions in the world. The word Vedanta literally means the end of knowledge, referring to the wisdom found in the Upanishads, the concluding sections of India's ancient scriptures. At its heart, Vedanta explores the biggest questions of human existence. Who am I? What is the nature of reality? And how can I be free from suffering? Vedanta teaches that our true self, called Atman, is not separate from Brahman, the infinite, unchanging reality that underlies everything. The feeling of separation, what Vedanta calls Maya, is an illusion. Through self-inquiry, meditation, and spiritual practice, we can see through this illusion and realize that we're already whole, already connected, already free. This is why Vedanta is often called a path of knowledge. It's less about belief and more about direct experience and understanding. The guest who will help us explore Vedanta and other integrative psychiatric approaches to life is Dr. Krishna Taneja. Dr. Taneja is an integrative psychiatrist and founder of the Mess to Thrive philosophy, dedicated to transforming mental health care through holistic, trauma-informed approaches. She leads Integrative Medicine Education at Southern Illinois University Psychiatry program, developed and streamlined National Integrative Psychiatry curricula for residency and fellowship programs, and has driven large-scale initiatives addressing population-wide trauma, including systemic reforms and pilot programs, from government levels to grassroots communities worldwide. Born into a lineage steeped in Vedanta, Dr. Taneja has been immersed in spiritual practice since infancy, guided by a guru since her birth and formally entering the Gurukul system as a young child. Growing up in ashram life, she worked on cultivating an innate understanding of prana, also known as life force, knowledge of the self, and the transformative power of meditation. Complementing this foundation, she apprenticed with indigenous medicine men and women across North America, mastering diverse energy healing modalities from theta healing, Reiki, and chakra balancing to shamanic journeying. By weaving these time-honored practices into evidence-based energy psychology and trauma-informed psychiatry, Dr. Taneja offers an integrative framework that honors both scientific rigor and spiritual wisdom, making her an ideal guide for exploring the convergence of Vedanta, energy medicine, and modern mental health. Dr. Taneja, welcome to my Quantum Couch.
Thank you so much for having me, Ina. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yay! I'm very excited that you are here.
Me too.
So, could you please tell us in a bit more detail, because I'm sure a lot of my audience and myself don't really know what Vedanta actually is?
So, Vedanta is a philosophical framework that comes from Hinduism as we know it. However, we prefer to call it Sanatan Dharma, which is usually known as the way of life. Hinduism, as we know it, is the faith that is practiced by people residing in the world of Hind or India. It's a misnomer from when India was invaded and lived by various other people, for example, the Persians. It came from the people who lived by the Indus Valley or the Indus River, and people started calling them, hey, they're Indus, and then it translated to becoming Hindus. Essentially, what people back then used to do was it was a way of life. However they chose to practice that, whether that was faith, whether that was rituals, ceremonies, cultures, food, lifestyle, everything. So Sanatan Dharma essentially means a way of life that outlines how you can attain that ultimate truth and realization that you are that one consciousness and you have simply forgotten that. So you are no different from that ultimate consciousness that we call Brahman.
Mhm.
And you are the Atman, which is the individual self. And the purpose of your life is to be on this journey of self-realization And it outlines, so Vedanta is the philosophical framework that outlines how do you live your life within Sanatan Dharma to achieve and learn that ultimate reality. And once you learn that ultimate reality, that you are no different from this consciousness that we call it, then you realize that there is actually no reason for pain or suffering. Because who is going through that pain or suffering? The ego identity of this self. So once that ego identity of I am Krishna, I am a doctor, I am a daughter, husband, wife, child, healer, all of those identities, as you start breaking them down and you realize, well, wait, hey, what's within me is
Mhm,
also within the other person, is also all around me, in
mhm,
all living and non-living beings, it takes away a lot of the pain and suffering and attachment that comes with it.
mhm.
So that's kind of the purpose of life as we define it, and how you live that life is what Vedanta teaches us.
And how did you said that you were in this way of life since birth. So can you tell us a little bit more history about was your family part of this too? Like, how were you part of
So
all of
I
this
like to
journey?
think of it that actually was in it pre-birth, um, because my parents, when they were about 20 years old or something, they started getting involved with the system. Um, I mean, we've all grown up with it. We all grow up with the rituals and the culture. It's not separate, but they found their guru or their spiritual teacher who guides them on this path when they were around 20 years old. Um,
And is this
my
in India?
This was actually in Hong Kong. That's a fun story. So my dad was he graduated from college, took up his first job, moved to Hong Kong, and he was in a marketplace, just kind of going about his daily tasks. And this random Indian lady walks up to him from behind and hugs him. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you," mistaking him for her son. Then he turns around, and my dad is very, if you ever meet him and know him, he's very bubbly, very cheerful, very extroverted. And he's like, "Oh, hello. I don't know you, but I'll happily take a hug because I really miss my mom." And she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were my older son." And both of them get to chatting. And then she's like, "You know what? I think you're really gonna get along with my other son, and I would like for you to come and meet him. Are you free this evening? Can you come to this ashram that
Mhm.
I volunteer at? My son will be there." And my dad's like, "Yeah, of course. I'd love to meet him." And he walks in, it's an ashram, and her other son is a monk. And at the
And this is
time,
in Hong Kong?
this is in Hong Kong. And
Mhm,
he's a, Vedantic student or a Hindu monk.
mhm.
Um, and so my dad meets him, and he's attending these, what we call, satsang, which is keeping good company and learning. So there's like a lecture going on about some spiritual studies. They're having these youngsters are there. They're having these group discussions, debating the scriptures and debating what they're reading and the meaning of life. And, well, is this even practical? Is this just in the books? Because the school of practice that we've grown up with really encourages you to question, not just take everything at face value. So it's very much like, yeah, if you don't understand, don't just do it because somebody told you to. Ask, know why you're doing something, have these discussions and debates. So he's walking into this space with all these youngsters discussing and debating texts, and some older uncles and aunties just sitting and attending a lecture. There's some prayer going on, and of course, he's grown up with it. He's not, immune to what's happening. But then he meets this spiritual teacher who's a monk. He's garbed in yellow, and there's different stages of monkhood, in our Vedantic studies. So he's on the first couple stages of it, um, and that's how my dad met his guru and his spiritual teacher. And then my mom got married into it a couple years later, and I was born into it. In fact, at the time of my birth, my spiritual teacher, not the one who was in the yellow garb, but the person who founded the organization that we follow and prescribe to and listen to, the original spiritual teacher, the original guru that we have, he was visiting Hong Kong, and he did my naming ceremony and did another ceremony to bless my mom and me when I was still in her womb. So that's how I got my name. And that's how pre birth I was inducted into some of this. But when I was born, for me, everything was just you have your normal life, you have everything that you're going about, and then you also have this guru who you follow. It's a different thing that I wasn't thinking of him as my guru until a couple years ago. For me, he was like a second father. So my
Hmm.
relationship with him was always growing up as, "Hey, where are you? Did you get me things from your trip? What are we doing? Can we do something fun?" So it was great. I had a very different relationship with him. And it's only a couple years ago that something shifted and I had the surrenderment in my mind of you're more than a family member. You're more than someone who's just wearing this cloth and sitting there and teaching me these things. You are carrying a certain sense of wisdom that I want to embody and imbibe. And truly giving into that and surrendering to, yes, I will listen to what you say even if I don't know and understand what it is.
Hmm. I mean, there's so many interesting things you just mentioned. One is, I mean, I ignorantly did not realize that there is a relatively large Indian community in Hong Kong. How do you even know how the history came out to be that there was a community that originated there
So I
or
think
settled
what
there?
happens is, my original spiritual teacher was there around the time that the British had invaded India and everything else. He was a journalist doing exposés. He was a freedom fighter during that time. And once the British had left, he returned to his work of being a journalist, and he decided to do an exposé on the monks. And he's like, all of this is BS. You know, like, I think they are scamming people. So I am going to go up to the Himalayas and stay with these people and expose them for what they really are, which is a bunch of scamsters. And he spent a couple months over there and he started really living the way they did, doing the practices they did. And he realized that maybe this is not a scam. Maybe there's something more to this, right? Um, And eventually he decided during that journey that he was going to take up monkhood himself because he was asked a question. He went and asked his teacher a question. Um, why did you do this? And his spiritual teacher responded saying, if that's a question you really want an answer to, why don't you choose to do it? And he sat with it. He meditated upon it and he decided that was a path he wanted to walk. So he took up monkhood. He did the proper education and studies for it under teachers and studied the texts, everything. And usually, a lot of times, what happens is people like this, when they're on that journey, at some point in time through the studies and through the meditations and practices, many of them do end up witnessing and realizing that truth. Which is which we see in the modern world, a lot of people are achieving either through meditations or psychedelics. They're having those experiences of oneness. So it's not new. This has existed for a very long time. It's just how you are achieving those states of consciousness and awareness of oneness. A lot of these people, when they have those experiences, they decide to maybe stay back. And they're like, okay, well, I don't need attachments with the world. I don't need to be involved with the world in this way necessarily. So I am going to live a very basic life with hardly any needs, live in my little hut in the forest and keep meditating. That's what I would like to dedicate my life to. And the students who want to learn from me, they will find their way, as my original spiritual teacher did.
Mhm.
Um, for ease of conversation, we call him Gurudev.
Mhm.
So that's what we knew Gurudev did. He went there, he found them, he studied under them. But one day he was sitting upon the banks of the Ganges River and meditating, and he realized that this river is flowing from the tops of the mountain all the way to the city. And through its route, it's nurturing so many people. It's nurturing the plants and the animals and the wildlife over there. It's nurturing the people. It's giving them water, it's giving them medicine, it's giving them water for food. It's taking care of the people. And maybe that's what he wants to do. Maybe he doesn't want people to come up the river and find him, but maybe he wants to take the knowledge to the people. And he went and shared this with his teachers who were like, well, are you sure you want to do this? It's not going to be easy. People don't really want this knowledge. People prefer being ignorant. And he said, it doesn't matter. It's my role, it's my purpose that even if people don't realize that they want it, I would like to bring them that knowledge. And those who want to learn, they will show up. And who it's right for, they will show up. So he embarked on this journey, and he was one of the first people back then who translated all the texts in the scriptures from Sanskrit to English to make it more accessible. Um, and so now, as a result of that, we have all these texts and books, and a lot of that is preserved because around that time we had already started losing the original languages. Similar to what happens in a lot of parts of the world where colonialism happened. So a lot of it was preserved. And also because there was this mindset at a certain point in time that this knowledge is very special and you only keep it for the elite. There's only certain people who have access to it. Maybe women and children don't. Maybe people of a certain background don't. And so he started breaking those barriers and saying, nope, absolutely not. Everybody deserves access to this knowledge. What they do with this knowledge is up to them. So as a result, he started his journey with maybe hardly one person in an entire lecture hall, and the one person was the security guard who was locking the doors. Um, and the people started coming to see him because they're like, "Who's this madman who just talks in an empty room?" Because he had said, "I've made this commitment to give this talk, and it doesn't matter if nobody shows up, I'm still giving the talk. That's my commitment." So he would just keep talking and giving these stories and anecdotes and, information about the Vedas and the translations to an empty room. So people would just be like, look at that, look at that, look at this crazy guy who's just here sharing these stories, talking to himself in a room. And they stayed because they found something in what he said. And they're like, wait, that actually makes sense. Now I want to come back and see what he says tomorrow. And slowly, 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 from that one man and the security guard who was locking the doors to 3 people, to 5 people, to more people, and more people kept getting attached. And they were like, Swamiji, Gurudev, have you thought about maybe like writing books about this? Have you thought about translating this into videos, to audios? And so that started expanding and expanding. And eventually, the people in India who grew up with him, learning from him, studying with him, the knowledge spread because Indians spread across the world. Globalization was happening. Indians were traveling everywhere. They were looking for that community and to stay connected with their roots and a safe place to be able to practice and learn some of these things. Um, so that's how it went to worldwide. So it's not only in Hong Kong, but there are very large centers of knowledge and education for Vedanta through this group. In Australia, New Zealand, London, the United States has a gigantic group, Canada, um, and many other places. My
So
parents
is
just meet them in Hong Kong.
got it. So is Vedanta one of the many paths within Hinduism, or is this like the main kind of leading philosophy within Hinduism?
So Sanatan Dharma, because it's saying it's a way of life, is more universal.
Hmm.
Right? It says anybody can follow it. It's not a faith, it's not a religion. One of the rituals are a part of it, but they're
Hmm.
not everything, right? So if the ultimate goal is to realize that truth, there's multiple paths to realize that truth. And Vedanta outlines those multiple paths. Vedanta is simply the collection of the knowledge and the philosophies and that different people have discovered and written about in their own journeys. Um, so there's actually 4 main paths that you can follow to realize that. And the 4 paths are prescribed according to a person's temperament and personality and what works for them or doesn't work for them. Um, so there is karma yoga, which is action oriented. There is bhakti yoga, which is faith oriented. There is jnana yoga, which is knowledge oriented. And there is dhyan yoga, which is meditation oriented. I will use the English translations for our conversation for ease. So what it says is the first one is action oriented. If you do your actions in a way that's oriented to purposefulness within morality, within ethics, then you will be free. Well, I guess before I start talking about this, I need to explain the concept of karma, which is something we've heard about a lot in the West, but we don't possibly quite understand. So, karma is basically the law of cause and effect. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So, any action that you take in your life has to have some kind of a reaction. Now, within a lot of the Eastern philosophies, we don't believe that birth is linear, right? We believe birth and cycles of birth are cyclical. So you are born, you die, you are reborn as a different person and as a different identity. And you may or may not have memories of those lifetimes. There are notes and prescription. There's documentation way back where people do actually remember their lifetimes. But in the modern world, we don't really know about that and talk about that. But essentially, when you think about life as cyclical, what you're saying is, well, the purpose of all of my lifetimes is to realize that truth. And every single time you're making progress, every birth, every cycle, you're making progress within that journey. Now, what's happening is that as you're going about your life, you are accumulating karma, which is the results of your action, right? And then those results of your action keep coming to fruition in your lifetimes. So the purpose of life is you're trying to realize that truth. In the process of realizing
And
that
what truth
truth,
is that?
we are not separate from that consciousness.
Mhm.
That Brahman and Atman, which is the ultimate consciousness, and the self are not separate. All the pathways that we're talking about, that the different ways to reach it, are simply helping us in figuring out, well, how do I live my life to eventually realize that truth? And that's going to be a different pathway for each person because we're all different. We come from different backgrounds. We have different personalities, different temperaments. Not everybody likes to sit down and meditate, and not everybody likes to sit down and pray. So that's kind of where the different pathways come from. But to understand those pathways and how we can prescribe them, we have to understand the concept of karma and how in the philosophy this works. So what happens is when you are born, there's a part of your karma that determines what you are already born with, which is what we call your destiny. So what family you're born in, what nationality, what background, are you born in a rich family, in a middle class family, in a poor family, what resources are you born with? All of that is predetermined to an extent by the actions you accumulated in your past lifetimes. And then there's the consequences of your action of, well, what's happening in your day-to-day life. And then there's also, what do you do with these cards that have been dealt to you? And so what do you do with these cards that have been dealt to you so you can get to that ultimate goal is what's in the 4 yogas or the 4 ways. So one of them that we were talking about, the action-oriented one, is to say, well, what if I did my actions in a way where I'm not necessarily accumulating more karma? Because karma is not good or bad, it's just the consequence of your action. So if you have a bad action where you hurt somebody, it's going to come back to you. And the favorite example that my spiritual teacher shares is that if, let's say, you were in an accident and you hit somebody and you hit and ran, then at some point in time in all of your lifetimes, you are going to get in an accident and somebody's going to hit and run on you. Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? But let's say after that, you had a lot of guilt for what you did, and you were like, okay, I need to correct this, I need to do something about it. And you start this entire business of ambulances to make sure nobody ever goes without an ambulance. So that is also going to come back to you. So when you get hit by somebody, there will also be an ambulance standing there to help you because that's also what you did. And so that is how Even though you did an action, your other actions will determine what happens to you in the future at what point in time. Um, and so if your actions are oriented in a way that you can reduce or change your karma if they're ethical, if they're moral, and if they're aligned with your higher purpose and in service, then you make progress on this path and on this journey. So that is action oriented or karma yoga. Then there's bhakti yoga, which is more faith based because there's a lot of people who are more than willing to surrender to that higher power, to do the rituals and the singing and the praying and everything that comes with it. And there are many people who can just in their love of God, or and when I say God, I mean any higher self or any divine power. We are saying God, but for someone practicing, it could be whatever is the higher power they identify with. In just merely that love, they can achieve it. Very similar to what we see with parents with their kids. Where in their love for their child, so many times they're able to overcome the aches and pains and their own needs and their own desires um, to serve their love for their child. Similarly, if you are loving something greater than yourself, in that love, you are able to overcome a lot of things. Um, whether that's hardships, whether that's, adjusting, whether that's discipline or anything else. So that's bhakti yoga. Then there is the studying the texts and the scriptures and understanding them, intellectualizing them, questioning them, and really embodying the knowledge. That is the knowledge based path. And then the final is meditating upon it and experiencing it. Now, what they say is that, of course, different people have the different ones that are more dominant for them, but they don't go without each other. They're hand in hand. So, at different phases of your spiritual journey, you will be in different parts of it. It just matters where you're starting with.
Hmm. So, question then that arises, and this is, I guess, extrapolating this philosophy into the psychiatry world and also just day-to-day life. So I have read a lot of accounts as well of people who were in between lives under hypnosis or during like about their past lives, and through the hypnosis they tell a lot of stories what they see, and they really align exactly with what you're saying, is that basically um w- life we have now has in some ways been predestined based on the things that we need to learn going forward. And so if, like we said, there was something that happened that we were very cruel, then in some point in our lifetime, we're going to be the experiencer of the cruelty by somebody else. And all of that just kind of plays out. And I think that if you really kind of dig down and if uh we think about it, how much free will do we really have? And how much do we then work on things? Because if we see somebody else getting hurt, then if we reason, well, that person needs to learn their lessons, where's the line between allowing them to learn and then also helping them? And then if we are helping them, how much of it is also our free will versus this is a destiny that was played out because that person also needs that help for whatever reason based on their lifetime? What are
I
your thoughts
think,
about it?
yeah, that's a great question. I think we talk about that a lot in Vedanta because destiny is called prarabdha, which is what we were describing as what are you born with, right? Um, what you do with your destiny is your free will. And that is very, very important, and you always have it because you can be, for example, you are going to, if you're a farmer and you're going to plant some seeds and you have a bunch of seeds available to you, let's say you have 5 sacks of rice seeds available to you, right? What seeds you chose and you planted is probably predestined. And when you planted them and where you planted them is now set in stone. That's not changing. The season that you planted them in, the fact that it's going to rain on a certain day, can't change that. You can't change the seed that you've already picked and planted. That's your karma, that's your destiny. But now that you know certain parts of like, hey, and now I know it's going to rain in 3 days and it's going to flood my field. Is there nothing you can do about it? Or are you going to sit back and be like, oh no, my plants are gone, my rice is gone, there's nothing I can do about it. This is just, it's destiny. We're not going to say that because the reality is there is a lot more we could do about it. I have other tools and skill sets that are available to me. I could build an irrigation system that lets the water flow. I could build some kind of a shelter space if there's going to be excessive rain to do that. If there's going to be less rain, I can install a different kind of irrigation system to help the plants grow.
How
I
do we know
you
that
do
was not also predestined? Like if ours planting the seeds in this particular place and choosing whatever seeds that we chose wasn't really a choice of ours, then how do we know that us planting an irrigation system is a choice and not something
well,
predestined either?
well, the first part of it is it's not a choice of yours, right? Because we think of it as it's not a choice of mine when I'm saying it's me, this physical body, this identity, right? But the me, when we talk about it in this framework, is your soul or your spirit or the consciousness within you that's living this out.
Mhm. On
So
a more continuous
I,
scale outside of
right,
our
yeah,
lifetime. Mhm.
right. So I, as Krishna, who is this person, may not have chosen that. But the I, which is the consciousness or the awareness or the observer within me that's living as
Mhm.
this physical identity, did choose it,
Hmm.
which
So
is
we may
where we,
not always be aware of the choices that were made. To us, they seem like destiny, perhaps, but it was maybe something that was playing out for on a bigger scale.
and it's either choices or it's the actions that you have uh, done in a previous lifetime that eventually are determining some of these things. So if you did good actions, then you are more likely, or like more, when I say good, I mean moral, ethical, not hurting too many people with it or serving more people with it, then you are more likely to be born in a place where you don't have as much pain and suffering from those fronts. And that may be different for different people because not everybody born in a rich household is free of pain and suffering, and not everybody who is a beggar on the streets is free of pain and suffering either. You know, some of them could be the happiest people. Some of them could be the most miserable people because it's a state of mind. It's not what's been given to you.
The question that is coming to mind is, does Vedanta have anything to say about why suffering exists in the first place?
Well, it's a product of our own consciousness. Our actual state is just bliss. If you are aware of that ultimate truth, the absolute consciousness, there is no pain or suffering. There is only bliss and joyousness. And that's all of our true nature. The cause of pain and suffering is the fact that we have forgotten that we are that, and we are starting to identify with this physical body and this identity. So, an example is if this body is in pain, then I'm saying I am in pain and I'm suffering because of the pain. If I think that, hey, I'm not really this body, like eventually it's gonna go away, I am something more than this, then you don't have as much suffering from the pain. Because a lot of our suffering is, why is this happening to me? A lot of our suffering is, why did this person go so quickly? Why, now I'm having grief from this. But then if you understand the philosophical frameworks, it takes away some of that. And it's easier to say when I'm saying this as a philosophical framework as human beings who are going through those things, it's definitely there. But it's also that people who start going up on this ladder of awareness, the suffering gets lesser and lesser because you start viewing the world differently and you start viewing yourself differently and you start viewing your experiences differently. So when my pain and suffering is coming from the question of why me? Why do I have all these health conditions? And why does everybody treat me so poorly and so badly and everything? Well, the answer of why me is karma. Right? So if you're kind of realizing, well, okay, well, I guess this must have happened. Now, what do I do with it? And that's where your free will comes in. It's like, okay, how do I work with it? How do I become a better person? How do I change my actions? How do I work with whatever these fears and beliefs and feelings are within me? And so that's where your free will comes into play. And that's also where you start removing yourself from the pain and suffering. The other part of removing pain and suffering is acting with detachment, because a lot of times we're doing actions with the hope and goal of achieving something. If I study really hard, I'll get really good marks. If I study really hard, I'll match and I'll get into residency and I'll be this doctor and I'll have a lot of name and fame and I'll have all this money, blah, blah, blah. If I do this, then I'm going to get married and I'm going to have these kids and I'll be happy and then in love. We have expectations. So a lot of the cause of pain and suffering is expectations. So what Vedanta teaches you is when you do these actions like the karma yoga or the action oriented path of it, if you do it with detachment from the outcome, you do your best, do whatever you can, that's your free will. What comes of it is part of your destiny because
Mhm.
you're not entitled to the fruits of your labor. So what
Mm,
I mean, in the way we expect them. You're not entitled to, well, but I did everything and I still didn't get the money or I still didn't get the promotion. It's like, well, you do your best? Okay. If you're detached from the outcome, you're not going to be upset about it because you will be content with I did everything I can and then whatever happens from it is my destiny.
So, what is the purpose of embodiment to begin with? If there is this consciousness that is universal and we're just seeds and manifestations of this consciousness, does Vedanta have anything to say about the purpose of souls being embodied and having the cycle?
I think what ends up the way I understand it and what I think happens is that w- you start identifying more and more with something that is not that ultimate consciousness. So it might come up as, and when I'm saying that, I don't mean like as the physical body. I mean, like, imagine this energetic blob who's just kind of existing in the universe. And it's like, oh, well, I am this blob. Okay, here's an example. Basically, what we're saying is there's the ocean, right? And then there's waves of the ocean. The waves come and the waves go, but the waves eventually become part of the ocean. They're not separate from the ocean, and they cannot exist without the ocean. That's basically Brahman and Atma, right? But each wave has its own texture, it has its own profile, it has its own everything, it has its own energy. That's also the nature. The ocean cannot exist without waves, and the waves cannot exist without the ocean. The challenge starts happening is when the wave starts saying, "Oh, it's just me. I don't need the ocean. I don't exist without the ocean. It's just me. And look at me. I am this and I am that." So the I am is where it starts becoming a different identity. And what happens is you start with one identity, like I am separate, I am something, and it starts becoming stronger and stronger. And that's sort of what starts playing out. And it becomes these different identities of, well, now I'm born and I'm here. So, like, if I were to look at my identities, I am a female. I am a Indian. I am a Hindu. I am a doctor. I am a psychiatrist. I'm an integrative psychiatrist. I'm a daughter. And it can go on, right? But these are all the identities that I identify with. But where did they come from? They came from certain predispositions that I have to choose certain things. For example, and this is what we talk about in modern psychiatry as our core beliefs or our core patterns that define who we might be in terms of either a temperament or a personality type or all the personality scales we do. And you're like, oh, you're extroverted and you're more likely to do XYZ and succeed in XYZ because we have predispositions within us. Now, the way Vedanta describes is those predispositions are not just of this lifetime, they are from lifetimes that you accumulate. And so when you choose your next life, or you have the destiny that chooses your next life, all of that is basically related to, well, what is it that I need to learn? Because the soul's ultimate purpose is also, well, I kind of got lost and I'm a wave that doesn't know what to do without the ocean, and I kind of want to find my way back to recognizing that I am the ocean, but how do I do that? So the soul also knows that that's its purpose. And what it's trying to do is figure that out. And so every lifetime it's choosing, well, what is it that I'm still working on and what is it that I still need to learn? Well, it seems like I've been playing out this very weird dynamic with maternal figures. I guess I just need to keep, because that's my core belief or pattern and I need to break it. So how about I choose a life where I have a challenging relationship with my mother and that plays out differently. How about in the life after that I choose a relationship which is very good with my mother and let's see what I learn from that. So that's kind of how the soul or the spirit is choosing to an extent because it's choosing the lessons it wants to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about it instead of that macro and that continuum to this individual, it's this individual choosing, well, what lessons do I want to be learning and how do I want to learn them? Can I learn them with ease and grace or do I need to go through a lot of hardships? And what actions can I take then to learn those things? And that's your free will.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever explored your previous lives? Were you able to tap into them? Do you have any memory of them?
So when I was training in theta healing, one of the practices that they taught us was within past lives and exploring past lives. So yes, I have. Is that something that I practice or I recommend people do? Not necessarily. Because I don't know. And when I've seen this happening in practice, whether other people have done it or I've witnessed it happen, sometimes people get stuck in, well, that happened in my past life, and that's why I am meant to be with this person. This person and I were in a relationship in a past life, so I'm now going to leave my husband and be with this, like, I've seen that happen.
Oh, wow.
And so what happens is we're talking about, like, I don't know that it helps people move forward in their journey.
Interesting,
I
because
think
I've seen people actually really heal from exploring their
Mhm.
past lives. I wonder if it's just one of those modalities that can be used and it can come out positive, but can also come out
Right.
everything in between positive and
And I
negative.
think And I think, like, with any modality, then it's a tool in your toolbox
Sure.
that may be beneficial for some people, but may be harmful for some people, and then
Mm.
you as the healer, practitioner, clinician needs to decide, is this something that's appropriate for this person?
How would you
Versus
know, though? How would you know with
and
past life whether this would be something beneficial if you don't even know, for example, what the past life would be until you
Right.
get into it?
So you may not know what the past life would be, but you know your patient or you know your client and you
Mm.
know where their tendencies might be. So you can assess in your assessments to see, it's kind of like seeing, well, am I going to use CBT with this patient? Am I going to use psychodynamic? Am I going to use DBT? Am I using mindfulness? Those are also tools.
Sure.
Past life regression or any of the other energy psychology modalities are also tools. But just as we're seeing, hey, is this person really ready to challenge their cognitive distortions and thought patterns? Some of them are not. Maybe they're just ready to learn coping skills and then you work differently. And then you get them ready to get to a point where they can um, deal with the reality of their cognitive distortions and challenge them and work with it. But if you do it too soon, then there's consequences to that. Some of the simplest ones that we all see are, well, they're not coming back and they're not doing the work. But it's also then, same thing with psychodynamic. There are these unconscious beliefs and the goal of therapy is to try to bring them into the consciousness. But if you do it too soon, then you run the risk of the person not accepting it and the consequences of being confronted with a reality they weren't ready to accept. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with past life regression,
Makes
where
sense.
instead of your unconscious belief, you're looking at maybe a past life belief or something of that sort. Now, there are some people who might find healing in knowing why they have some cancer or why they have some other health condition. And there are some people who are going to then blame the person. Like, let's say they went into a past life and they saw that, oh, I hurt somebody in my family and that's my daughter in law. And now I'm going to be resentful towards my daughter in law. It's like, no, it was a consequence of your actions, right? It wasn't your daughter-in-law didn't do anything. In fact, you hurt your daughter-in-law in a previous lifetime, but now you're just going to be a horrible person to this person because the resentment and the anger needs a place to go. Um, but someone, on the other hand, might perceive it very differently, take accountability, and practice forgiveness as a result of it. So it's very similar to how we're assessing in psychodynamic therapy of, are they ready for this? Are they ready to view the truth that their unconscious is holding on to? If yes, then you get them to that point and then challenge it. If not, you don't immediately be like, well, you know where this is coming from. This is where it's coming from.
No, completely makes sense. So you are obviously using different modalities. You have a lot of different tools in your toolbox. So Vedanta is one of them. And how do you integrate it into your practice? Is it just because this is who you are and so you bring it in through you, or is there something conscious pieces you're bringing into the practice?
I think the part of it that I bring is it's not a certain practice. It's not like I'm prescribing one of the four pathways or the yogas or anything. It's more how it's defined who I am and my mindset and how I approach people, medicine, connections. And I think one of the biggest parts of it is that there is a subtleness to existence. We have the gross body, which is the physical body. We have the mind, we have the intellect. These are all things that medicine works with. And honestly, medicine sometimes, at least psychiatry, doesn't even recognize that body is also part of it at times. We're just working on the mind and intellect. The body part is very new. It is only in the last decade or so that we have somatic experiencing and body keeps the score and this awareness that yes, your body is holding on to these things. But that's something Vedanta has talked about for centuries, where you are not separate. It's the true form of holistic approach. Because even with Vedanta, when we say it's a way of life, Ayurveda is a part of it, astrology is a part of it, everything's a part of it. So it's not separate from everything. But when we think about modern medicine, we've removed a lot of those things because we don't understand it. We don't have the evidence base for, well, how are planets and stars affecting me? Vedanta does. That's part of your destiny, the moment that you're born, where the planets are and how they continue to affect you in the rest of your life, and how the transit at different parts of your life will affect you. That's your destiny. So there's some knowledge and understanding there, but modern medicine doesn't have that evidence base for it to explain it. So we kind of discard a lot of those modalities, and we focus on what we know within modern medicine. What we know within modern medicine is for psychiatry, let's say, how do I work with the mind and intellect? Then we started understanding, oh, wait, we have fascia and we have muscles and we have hormones, and the body is getting affected by this. And maybe let's explore different ways of releasing it from the body. All the indigenous cultures and faiths and um, Vedanta have had that as part of their practice. If we look at China, Japan, India, they've all had body based practices. If we look at indigenous medicine, they've all had those practices. It's not new to them. So if we take that a step further, it's not just the body, mind, and intellect, or it's not just the conscious and the subconscious mind within the mind. It's also the unconscious mind. It's also the patterns and the beliefs that we hold on to from that front, which modern medicine is not working with. So if we don't acknowledge and recognize, let's say, past lives, we're not going to work on it. If we don't recognize that energy exists and we are energy and how the energy moves through us, we're not going to work on it. We're only going to work on the cognitive parts of it, which is why if we look at the tools we have within modern medicine, they are all related to the mind and intellect and challenging those things. But there's a large part of it that's missing, which is the subtle part of it. And Vedanta has all of those things. We have something called vasanas, which is impressions that our mind carries. Um, and we have something called samskaras, which is like a deeper level of those impressions, which also the mind carries. And these are vasanas are best described maybe in a translation as the core beliefs that we have. And samsaras are like the initial experience you might have that you don't quite understand. So for example, you might have had a bad experience with a dog, but you don't remember it, you don't know what happened, but you just know you'll flinch every time you see that. That's your samsara. And then if you keep having bad experiences with dogs, that thought or that impression just becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it becomes a full-fledged fear or phobia, or has panic attacks, or has anxiety, depression. So those are all manifestations of it, or it becomes a core belief. Or like if somebody said something bad, then you're like, oh, okay, you took it a certain way. That's your samsara. Um, but then what ends up happening is if it keeps becoming stronger and stronger, you keep having those experiences, it ends up becoming your impression or your belief of, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and it starts playing out. And then you have things like anxiety, depression, low self-worth, self-doubt, fears of abandonment, rejection, etc., etc. So when we work in modern psychiatry, we're working with, well, where's the fear of rejection coming from? And what am I doing with it and coping with it? But what about where it originally came from and why you might have it and all the times that you had those experiences? And we kind of forget that. So what I'm trying to say is that I think there is something to the subtleness of existence and to the energetics of existence or the life force that exists within us and how it interacts with us as the body, mind, intellect, and with the world around us that we forget about. And so we don't have a lot of tools and modalities that work with it, which is why many times people have those treatment resistant diseases because you do everything in your toolbox and nothing helps because maybe it's coming from somewhere else and maybe there's something else that needs to happen. And that's where the energy work comes into play. And some of this energy work that I practice comes from what I've grown up with, right? Like a meditation practice, a guided meditation, and how you lead them through that. Or how do I use sound medicine and which is vibrational medicine to help somebody? How do I prescribe rituals to help with that? How do I prescribe ceremony to help with that? Again, every faith and culture from the indigenous backgrounds, whether the East or the West, have those practices. So, how do I use all of those to help with the more subtler causes of these mental health conditions? And some people are not ready for it. Some people are going to stick with the cognitive.
Can you give an example of a patient coming in and they're struggling, let's say, with panic attacks? What can you prescribe? You said sometimes you prescribe rituals, sometimes you do the energy healing. Can you give us a little bit more detail about what all of that entails, please?
So, my practice, because I've trained with a lot of different people, it's not just, for example, a Vedantic practice. I think when I talk about Vedanta, it's more the essence of who I am and the perspective and approach I take. The practices that I prescribe are learned from many different cultures. Um, because that's and then so it becomes these are all the tools in my toolbox, what's going to work for somebody, right? For panic attacks, a very good thing is tapping in the emotional freedom technique. Because and it comes from Chinese medicine because what it's doing is it's working on the meridian system. Now, Ayurveda also has a meridian system, and if we overlap the Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic systems from like the texts from way back, the points are actually very similar where they overlie. And like it's very fascinating to me because there was no internet back then. There was nothing really for communication back then. These are two different sets of people doing their two different sets of studying and have both independently discovered points and pathways that merge in similar areas and work on similar things. There's something to it if two independent bodies are discovering this. But what we know in modern medicine and we have evidence for is the emotional freedom technique, which um, aligns with the meridian systems of Chinese medicine. And those are like these points over here. Each of them works on different things. Some of them are for anxiety relief, some of them are for letting go of the fear, some of them are for letting go of doubt, some of them are for emotional release.
So it's literal tapping. For those of
It's
you who are
dual
listening and
tapping.
not watching, Dr. Taneja actually is tapping on certain points of her face and her body.
Yeah. And then there's a point here on the side of your arm. And then there's the karate chop point, and you kind of just keep going through it over and over again. There's different ways people practice it. Sometimes people say statements and affirmations. Sometimes people say what they're experiencing, like, I'm so scared this is going to happen. This is what I'm worried about. Sometimes people don't even tap because for some people, the tapping itself can be overstimulating. I am one of those people where I don't like the tapping too much. For my people with autism or high sensory perception, they don't like the tapping as much. They might not. It depends where they're at. So I always ask them, I'm like, but the point is, it's not necessarily the tapping itself, right? It's activating that point. So you can even activate it by simply touching it. So if people don't like the tap itself, you can just keep touching it. And then sometimes people ask me, well, what's the right way to do it, right? Do I say the good thing? Do I say affirmations? Do I say negative things? How long do I hold each point? The point is, it doesn't matter. You just do what feels right to you. Because another thing that modern medicine tells us is there's a right way to do everything. There's a prescription, there's a time duration. And if you don't do it exactly this way, then it's not going to work or there's consequences. Now, when it comes to herbs, supplements, medicine, yes. When it comes to certain practices, maybe yes. When it comes to energetic practices, your body knows best because your body is the wisdom holder. And all we're trying to do with any of these practices is tap into that because we've forgotten the wisdom that our body holds. So you're just trying to build a better connection with yourself and with your body so that you can remember what it is. And then your body will tell you, like, yeah, okay, I think this is enough. Or, maybe today we want to do the tapping. Maybe I want to do the tapping on this point, but hold this point. So you kind of just follow that instinct. That's harder to do because we're not living in a world where we really listen to ourselves or
Mhm.
we listen to our intuition. It's kind of been shut down. So it's building that intuition slowly, and initially it's with these guided practices where you're saying, okay, do this for like 2 minutes and do it like this, and gradually encouraging them, like, well, you stopped there, why did you stop? And they're like, well, I didn't feel like doing it. Great. Just because I told you to doesn't mean you do it. It's just like, okay, I felt like I had to stop and that was too much for my body, so I'm going to stop. Great. But the emotional freedom technique is great for panic attacks.
Mhm.
And many times what I've seen is if, for example, like a child is having a panic attack, and if the parent is sitting and doing the technique with them, even if the child's not doing it, the parent's doing it, it helps calm down
Hmm.
the child.
It's
So it's
grounding.
also, yes, it's also I don't want to say by proxy, but more so like the cohesion, the presence, and doing it together, even if the other person isn't actively engaging in it.
Mhm. Do you think it's more of like synchronization of energies where the parent is sitting next to a child and the child is picking up on the parent's kind of calming, and so it helps them to resonate on equal frequency?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of different things. Um, But one of the things we definitely know is that when people are together, their brainwaves start aligning. Um, and in energy work, that might come from like auras and how your auras interact with each other and those kind of things. But within the realm of modern medicine, we know that brainwaves start changing. We know that certain levels of presence with certain people will affect your hormone levels. If it's someone you don't like, your stress hormones are going high, or if it is someone that you feel connected to, your oxytocin is going high. And that, so again, we're discovering in modern medicine a lot of things that we've ignored within indigenous practices as woo woo, um, because we just didn't know why. But now we're starting to understand. So I think when people are doing it together, there's the co-regulation, there's, your mind, we have the mirror neuron. So when you see somebody do a certain thing or be a certain way or hold that calm presence, your mind starts reflecting that. So there's that part of it and how it's affecting the neuroplasticity. Then there's the hormones part of it, there's the brainwave part of it.
You've mentioned theta healing,
Okay.
uh, or energy work. Can you please tell us a little bit more about that? Because obviously this is also part of your one of your modalities that you practice.
Yeah. Um, I think essentially it's what I was describing earlier, where I go beyond just the mind and intellect and work with vibrational medicine a lot. Because as we talk about in physics, we are made up of atoms and molecules, and all those atoms and molecules are vibrating at a certain frequency. When there's imbalance within our body and our system, those vibrations start changing. They start at maybe that molecular level, become cellular level, then they become more at a physical level that manifests as disease or disorders, or even as our thoughts and beliefs. But all of that is vibration. Um, so when we talk about energy work, what we're saying is it's working with the vibrations of our body. We talk about life force. So within Hinduism, we call it, or Ayurveda, we call it prana. Within Chinese medicine, it's qi. Um, and all of them have these practices where we are working with that life force or that vibration or that energy, and working in that alignment. So, for example, the actual way that yoga, tai chi, and qigong are practiced, it's a mind body integrating practice, right? It's your physical body doing movement, it's combining it with breath work, it's combining it with some meditation, mindfulness, but it's also moving your energy and your life force. So even those practices that we know have so much evidence now coming up to reduce falls, like it's not just again weight loss and strength training, but we are seeing that those are reducing falls, reducing dementia risk, reducing stress hormones, and everything. It's an energy practice when it's practiced in the right way and the way that it's taught. Um, we mentioned sound medicine, which is also vibration medicine because sounds are vibrations. Now, sound medicine could be what we see now commonly as sound baths, where you have different instruments that somebody's playing, or you have the bowls and they're being played around somebody. And those vibrations move through somebody's body. And what that's doing is it's healing the vibrational imbalances. So, somebody might not yet know that they are going to have knee pain, or they're just starting to have knee pain. And I've seen this happen where they take a sound bowl and they're moving it across somebody's body for diagnostics, and they're able to, because the vibrations move differently, see where there are vacuums in somebody's energy field and be like, hey, is there something going on with your knee because the sound changed? And we had a sound bath and a sound demonstration at our residency program that we hosted. And we did that for a lot of different people where it was just like, oh, see? Yeah. Do you see that right at this point, there was a vacuum and you couldn't hear anything no matter what you did, but maybe with a different instrument you could, or you'd notice that the sound became high pitched or low pitched because it's picking up on those vibrational changes. Um, and so you move that sound or a different sound through that space and you help move the vibrations and then help with whatever aches, pains might be there, um, or emotional things that might be there. Then there's chanting. We know that chanting different types of prayers or mantras can be very effective. And we see this a lot in, again, the Eastern philosophies, where they've used this for a very long time. Many of those Eastern philosophies combine the meridian points with chanting. And there's different yogic practices that do that. There's breath work that works with that energy life force. So within Ayurveda, there's an entire branch called pranayama, which is just breath work. And it goes beyond, again, the modern medicine practices of deep breathing, which also we're now recognizing, oh, deep breathing helps with vagus nerve stimulation. It's helping us come out of the parasympathetic system and everything. But then there's also more activating breaths. There's also breaths to help balance you out. There's also breaths that are focusing on specific parts of your body. There's breath work that is heating to your body and cooling to your body. Um, and so there's an entire branch of medicine and practice that's just to do with breath and how you prescribe it. And again, there's more and more research coming out about those individual practices. So there's the alternate nostril breathing that we now have more evidence coming out for. There is sky breath, which is Sudarshan Kriya, which has more and more evidence coming out for. The challenge is because there's so many different types of breath work that we haven't yet explored the evidence base for all of them within modern medicine.
And what is evidence showing when they're researching these types of breath work?
I think overall they're showing decreased levels of cortisol, decreased, in general, decreased stress, decreased depression, anxiety, trauma symptoms, increased overall well being. And then they've noticed specific measures for each of these things, which could be heart rate, blood pressure, heart rate variability that are changing.
So interesting. And so the theta healing is it similar to Reiki when it comes to managing the vibrations, or is this just kind of like this overarching theme for a lot of different types of
I think it's an
work?
overarching theme of
Hmm.
different types of modalities. Basically, what it does is it's different forms of. It's a meditation that helps you get into the theta state, brainwave state, which is where you are when you're typically meditating. And the way they teach theta healing, the person who learned it and discovered it was, well, how do you work with different areas of it? So, for example, how do you explore past lives? How do you explore um, within spirituality, like different realms, different how are you able to connect with different states of consciousness for yourself or other people, and how do you work with the inner child, how do you discover the root cause of where some of these things are coming from and work with it. Now that's how I had trained and that's what I'd learned. Since then my practice has changed a lot because I trained with indigenous medicine men and women here as well. And I've in my practice learned, well, what are things that I want to be doing versus not want to be doing within everything that we learned. Um, and what's working, what's not working for my patient population. Not to say that the practice doesn't work, but just there's hundreds of things in my toolbox. What am I specializing in? So when they teach theta healing, it's not always for example, healing health conditions, right? There's other tools that you learn with it. And many people take that and do other things with it. Um, but I chose to hone those skills in for a healing practice.
Can you tell us a bit, what are you doing currently in your practice? Do you have a private practice? Where do you work? How can people find you if they really want to learn more from you?
Yeah. So I am currently working at a hospital in Indiana. And I work as an inpatient psychiatrist over there. I'm also with the Southern Illinois University and building their integrative medicine and psychiatry program in terms of education and curriculum development. And I'm in the process of developing more of these knowledge based modalities to bring to the people more directly. So they can find me on my website, drkrishnataneja.com, and connect with me from there.
That's so interesting that the fact that you're actually working on an inpatient unit. How much of these modalities can you actually bring in on the inpatient unit?
Actually, a lot.
Really?
Because what I end up seeing is what are the things that are bringing people to the inpatient unit? Typically, suicidality or
Hmm.
depression and anxiety that's gotten to the point of suicidality, um, or where they're having such a hard time taking care of themselves, or usually like psychosis or mania, right? Now, if we look at the indigenous practices of the world, um, psychosis and mania are altered states of awareness and consciousness where people might be stuck. Or if we talk about it from the Vedantic perspective, they're replaying something and they're stuck in a loophole of this in their consciousness somewhere. Um, some people can get, and yes, substances can contribute and make it worse or cause it. There's genetics, there's everything. But at the same time, when they're presenting to you, their energies are very scattered. They're not grounded, and oftentimes they're stuck in a different space. So what they often need is groundedness, and that is something that you can help with, right? Sometimes it's physical touch and physical presence where I'm just like, "Hey, do you wanna come down here? Do you wanna hold yourself like this and let's ground?" Sometimes they're not able to engage in something like that, and you can ground yourself very strongly in that moment, and that helps them ground for the same reasons we talked about previously, where the brainwaves start aligning and things like that. And then they're able to then at least be coherent enough to have the conversation with you, share that information. Will I say that in those states, the energy practices that I do will completely heal them? No, they need medicine. Many of them at those times need medicine. There's very, very few of them who are maybe stuck in a different state of consciousness or awareness because they did psychedelics or because they did something else. And in that situation, you may be able to bring them back. And I've done that before with energy work because we had a patient who had received EMDR, and they were not fully brought back and grounded after that session. And they were sent back out. And then after a little while, they became very disoriented and they ended up being in the ICU. And everybody thought this person was on drugs, but their tox screen was negative. Everything was negative. And if we talked to them, we realized that 2 days before this ICU admission, when they were disoriented and everything, that they had this session and it was wrapped up in a rush. And I was like, oh, I don't think
Hmm.
that you were completely brought back. And so I sat with them and we did a guided meditation and with them in the hospital, in the ICU. At the end of the day, they were discharged because they were alert, oriented, everything. So there are very specific cases in which you could lead a guided meditation and help either integrate parts of a person, which we can call inner child, or through the IFS system, these parts, there's times you can do that. And there's times where you recognize that there's something more. And right now, I can only help them ground, but they need medications. Um, but in general, like with the people who are depressed and suicidal, um, you can do a lot of that work.
This is really, really interesting. I can talk to you about this for hours, Krishna. This is so, so fascinating. We are, though, coming up more to the end of our episode. Are you ready to do some lightning round questions?
Yes, let's go.
You're brave. All right. A book that inspires you.
Hmm. I want to say the Bhagavad Gita.
Tell us more. Why?
Um, so the Bhagavad Gita is what we call the manual of life within Vedanta. Um, Essentially, if there was only one book you could read and that would tell you everything you need to know about Vedanta and how to live your life and the condensed summary version of every text, every scripture that's out there, it's that book. Um, so I'm named after a Indian god, Krishna, who is the manifestation of Lord Vishnu, who's the protector on earth. And so this was narrated by him to his friend Arjuna when they were in a battlefield and he was in the middle of a crisis, basically having a panic attack, about to go to war with his family members for an injustice that they had done. And he is like, how can I do this? I can't do this. And um, Krishna talks him out of the panic attack and realigns him with, well, what is your purpose in life? And it's a dialogue between the two people, where Arjuna is asking him all these questions and Krishna is basically telling him, well, this is the truth of life, this is the absolute truth, this is how you get there, this is what you do, this is how you do, so it goes into details of all the things we've talked about, like this is life, this is karma, this is how the world works essentially, and this is how you make it work. So it's like if life is a game, this is the manual of how to play that game and win at it.
Love it. As a side note, you were talking about how Vishnu, right, was going to war with his family members. That was him, right? No,
Arjuna, so his friend.
his friend. Sorry.
Yes.
How does Vedanta view war? I mean, is if the holy beings, I guess, and all knowledgeable beings go to war, what does that say about us? What luck do we have about not having war then?
I think it says that you walk the path of righteousness. And when there is imbalance of righteousness, there's consequences that need to happen for it. So if it's not that you do nonsensical war and just kill people for your ego or because you want to, but there are certain times that there are people who are engaging in that kind of behavior when they are practicing and spreading injustice and they are doing harm to others. And in that case, if there's no other way to stop them, then you do everything it takes to reestablish order and
Hmm.
peace. Because in what world is it just for you to keep letting injustice go on when you have something in your control and power? And in the Mahabharata, this is a story from the Mahabharata, this is the text from the Mahabharata, which, just to clarify, we is part of our history. It's not a story, it's part of our history. And if you go back and see now, there's a lot more historical and archaeological evidence coming about to reflect that these things happened back then. Um, so, as part of our history, when we talk about this, they say, like, well, if you are a king who is in the power of stopping this, why won't you stop it? And the only time this war happened is after they had exhausted all other options of diplomacy and convincing people to do otherwise, of trying to talk sense into them. And if you go read the stories, you see how many times people were given those chances, even during the war. Like, this is one of the most brutal wars in the world, one of the largest ones with the largest death amount, where for, years that the soil was red because of the blood. So it was bad. Many, many people lost their lives. At the same time, it came to that point because every other effort for peace and justice failed. But it doesn't um, celebrate, for example, like, oh, yes, just go to war because you want power and you want name and fame. It's like, that's not just.
So is it in some way um, saying that often war is not avoidable in human nature? It will happen over and over again, and it's not something that we can ultimately like arrive to never having?
What it says is that your purpose in human life is to follow your dharma,
Mm.
which is working in alignment with your higher purpose and working in alignment for the better of your society and how you can live your life to contribute to that. So, having said that, it is also your purpose as a human to take care of the community that you're a part of. When that community is falling and burning and in pain and suffering because of the actions of one individual or a couple individuals, then they need to be held accountable for those actions because you cannot stand on the bylines letting it happen. And what might be in your power is taking diplomatic action. What might be in your power is having conversations or whatever that might look like. But when you have exhausted every option of attaining justice, then it is not wrong to use even harsher means like violence. But it is only justified
When everything
for
else fails.
if everything else failed and you have not been able to restore that justice or peace and like stop that.
Can monks in within Vedanta take arms, or do they swear by no harm to anyone?
I don't know,
Hmm.
but I don't believe that's the case. If I look at our history,
Hmm.
it would there have been monks that have taken up arms. There are teachers, there are gurus who have trained in warfare, have trained other people in warfare, and have themselves taken part in it when the need arose.
Interesting. I'm so sorry. I am totally turning this lightning round into a very long reign, but this is really interesting.
We
Okay.
just open a can of worms.
Yes, totally. Okay, moving on. One myth about psychiatry that you would like to shed light on.
So that's a good one. I don't know that I have a good lightning response to it. I think a myth about psychiatry is that people think it's either all genetics or people think it's all cognitive. And now they're starting to, or, like, oh, yeah, if you take the pill, then you have more happy hormones. Or, now there's the other side of it where it's like, oh, if I just stop eating certain foods and I just focus on my nutrition, then I will no longer have this. And I think there's some truth to both, and and the truth actually lies somewhere in the middle. It's not it's not that you can cure everything with your diet. It's not that everything is a chemical imbalance either. I think it's a combination of everything. And as we've explored today, some of those combinations and causes and effects we understand in modern medicine, some of them we are still exploring. For example, the genetics and all those things we're still understanding and exploring. Now, when we talk about genetics, I would even say that's karma. That's your destiny when you're born, but you change it. Um, so some of it is that truth is in the middle. It's not far left, it's not far right.
I guess as with everything, there's nuance and gray areas that is
Yes.
often very difficult to see in our society, especially
Which
now.
is why when we practice a holistic approach or integrative medicine, you're able to look at all of them for everybody because the same nutritional prescriptions are not going to work for everyone. The same supplements are not going to work for everyone. The same medicine is not going to work for everyone. It is it is very, very subjective to somebody and what they're experiencing. So it really is an art of figuring out, well, what for whom and when and at what time. Because the same tool, the same technique given at the wrong time is going to backfire. So all of that is an art.
Well, I guess you will probably not like my next lightning round question, which asks if you could prescribe one daily ritual to everyone on Earth, what would it be?
But that's a hard one.
No, based on your answer previously, this is an impossible question.
But I think a good one is grounding and cleansing
Hmm.
of some kind. Because what happens is when we're existing in our day to day world, we are very external. We're very focused on the external needs and we're giving away a lot. And it's not just our time, attention, focus, money, anything, it's also our energy. Um, and we pick up a lot of things that we don't necessarily know. So oftentimes we're talking about, hey, I was hanging out with a person and now I just feel stuck and icky. And essentially we don't know how to describe it. So we're like the vibes were off and the vibes felt weird and now I'm just not great, or the vibes of this place felt weird. So I want to go there or I don't want to go there. There's a lot of things that we don't understand, but that's how we describe it. And if we actually go back to look into it, sometimes it's um, the presence of the people who are there. Sometimes it's um, one or two specific interactions we had. Sometimes it's smells. Sometimes it's sights. Sometimes it's the sounds around us, and all of that affecting all the pathways we talked about, whether that's our neurons, whether that's the chemicals, the hormones, the brain waves, everything. But even if we don't understand any of that, we know and we can pick up on, yeah, I just don't feel very great. And I don't think I like that place and I don't want to go there. Or, oh, wow, this place felt great or this person felt great, or whatever that might be. So we go about living our life, whether having awareness or not, of getting impacted by those things. So I think especially us as clinicians and physicians, we interact with so many people. And as a psychiatrist, we carry so many of their stories and oftentimes their pain as well, that it becomes very important for us to at some point in time let that go. And because some of this is happening either consciously or unconsciously, it's good to have a conscious practice of grounding yourself every day and letting go of what you're holding on to. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. um in the indigenous practices, they use smoke for it. So the Western indigenous practices have smudging of different kinds because the herbs have different properties. And they talk about how sage is to clear negativity, how Palo Santo is to bring in positivity, how cedar is for transformation because, and we know this with aromatherapy, different smells and scents have different effects on your brain. That's one part of it. The other part of it is probably the smoke is actually killing certain types of bacteria, viruses, and fungi around you. In the East, we have a lot of those practices as well, where we have certain herbs that we pray with and we put it on fire when we're doing the prayer rituals and we burn it. And again, the smell and everything clears a lot of it up. All of those herbs also have antibacterial, antiviral, anti inflammatory properties for when we are inhaling it. So there's a lot of ways that it's working. At the same time, if we're talking purely about the energy, it's cleansing you. So there's that. Then there's practices that are helping movement in your energetic field. So that's through air. So we use feathers. So if you've ever done smudging or you've seen smudging, there's feathers that they use. People use different types of feathers depending on what meaning they prescribe to it or um, what it might mean in their culture or where it comes from. So, for example, using the eagle feather, the hawk feather, a peacock feather, something else. All of that might be cultural and has benefit to it too. But essentially, when you move it around your auric field, it clears out the energies around you. And so, if you go to the Sikh religion, which also comes from India, when you go to pray and there's their altar space, which has the book that they pray upon, as you're walking up, there's a big feather that they're moving across from you. So a lot of practices and cultures that you go to also have that. And then there's others. So those are external ways that you can do it. And the internal ways are more just bringing intention, thought, consciousness, and bringing attention to your space where you are, taking a couple deep breaths. And with each breath, maybe imagining letting go of anything that you're holding on to, could be fears, negative beliefs, whatever it might be. You don't even need to know what it is. You can say an affirmation to yourself saying, I let this go. Or you can imagine like breathing in a certain color and exhaling a certain color. So What you do might be different because some people like breathing, some people don't. Some people need something external, some people like the internal aspects of it. So, what exactly you do for cleansing might be different, but cleansing and grounding in some way would be my one daily practice that people can take.
I love that. Um, to piggyback off of that, what is your favorite mind-body practice that no one
Mhm.
necessarily expects a psychiatrist to do?
I think it's dancing.
I love it. Yes, I'm with you on that one.
Because I think when people think about mind body medicine, the common myth with that is, oh, you have to sit straight, sit on the floor, sit on a chair and like cross your legs and do this. And maybe like if you're from the, Hindu practice, then you do your little mudras and you sit like this and you have to close your eyes and be totally uncomfortable with your posture and everything. And then like breathing and that's it. Or like intentional mindfulness and my mind should not be wandering and that's it, which are great practices for different purposes. It's great for concentration, it's great for something else, it's great for a specific kind of release. But people forget that movement can also be meditation. And when breath work doesn't work, movement does, because many times we're stuck in the freeze response. And when you're in the freeze, breathing can be hard. When you're in the freeze, what you need is to complete that movement and let your body move, and to feel safe in that. So, shaking is a practice that I really like, where you play some music and just shake it out, let it go, whether you do it gently or you do it more rigorously, depending on what your body needs, and then moving into a little dancey groovy.
I love that. That is the perfect answer. And on that answer, we're going to be wrapping up. Dr. Krishna Taneja, I just want to thank you so much for being here. It has been such a really wonderful conversation. You are like just an embodiment of so much knowledge and wisdom. And I'm hopeful that perhaps that we will can have you back on the podcast down the line because there's so much more that I would like to ask you. And I think we can learn a lot more from you.
Absolutely. It would be my honor and pleasure to come back. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the Quantum Couch with someone you think might love this space too. If you would like to reach out, you can email me at thequantumcouch@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for The Quantum Couch. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Dr. Ina Conboy. Take good care, stay curious, and keep exploring. The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship with Dr. Ina Conboy or any guest on this podcast. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.